So unless you've been living under a rock or you haven't been caught up in history or society, then you know on the news every so often, or in today's age a lot more often, police brutality is a major issue that's facing the United States, not only on white versus white, but also mainly white cops versus African American men, women, and children. Police brutality is one of several forms of police misconduct, which involves undue violence by police members. It exists in many countries across the world, but obviously we're mainly going to be focusing about here in America. And this act is illegal, but under the color of law, as it says, if the police life is truly in danger, then they have the right to kill whoever is putting their life in danger. Now, the thing about it is that most of these police acts are not actually, their lives are not in danger. Most of these killings are on unarmed black men who are just, at a corner store, or they're walking to school, or walking to the library, or simply walking anywhere, driving anywhere, riding their bike anywhere, and it's just off a suspicion that the cop has because of a stereotype that this country is based off, that if an African American man is walking in a hood or just walking at night, then he's probably up to something no good, and that's not necessarily true. There are many cases that are famous in today's society, going all the way back from 2014, where we have the famous Michael Brown incident in Ferguson, Missouri, that caused or ignited protests throughout the country, with the most famous ones being in Michael Brown's hometown of Ferguson, Missouri, and the biggest one outside of that being Oakland, California, where not only were people arrested and put in jail, but more people were injured and killed due to the protesting. The one that started this big debate in the 2010s decade was Trayvon Martin, with Zimmerman shooting him, an unarmed black man walking to wherever he was going, and just had his hood on, and he looked like he was up to no good. And the two most famous ones that are here recently is Philando Castile in Minnesota, and the one that hits really close to home here in Baton Rouge with Alton Sterling. All of these cases were unarmed black men who were shot by white cops, with the white cop not being put in jail based off this color of law that they are following, because apparently their lives were in danger. In 2018 alone, police killed a total of 1,166 people across the whole nation, with most of these deaths coming in big inner cities such as LA, Reno, Nevada, here home in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and other places like New York City and Baltimore. Only 22 days out of 365 days of 2018 had reported 0 incidents of victims being killed by police. Back in 2015, 30% of the victims that were killed were unarmed black men, comparing that to the 21% of unarmed white men that were killed by police. One third of black people killed by police in 2014 were actually a suspect of violence or of a criminal act or had a gun on them. So that means 2/3 of African Americans killed by police in 2014 were not suspected of anything. They were just shot and killed by cops. So this isn't anything new in this country. There's a long-standing history of police or militias acting out against African American people, with the first death of the Revolutionary War being shot by a British officer killing a black man, a free black man in Boston. And then with the most famous one recently as the Civil Rights Movement, where it was decades long of a fight for things back in the 50s, of Brown v. Board Education, and then with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and people like that in the 1960s. There was a lot of riots and, of course, a lot of police brutality.
And just to put some statistics behind that, in the 1960s there were nearly 100 black men under the age of 25 that were killed by law enforcement every year. This is yearly. So that percentage went down to 35 a year in the year 2000s, but African Americans were victims. Basically, 1 in every 4 person that was killed by the police was an African American. And that was in 1960 to 1970 period. Between the 1970s and 1980 periods and so forth, there was 1 in every 7 people. And in today's society now, it's 1 in every 10 people killed by police is an African American, male, female, child, whatever ethnicity. So obviously, that has gone down quite a bit since the civil rights era, but there's still a substantial amount of killings of, by African Americans from law enforcement, and that's uncalled for. African Americans make up 13% of the U.S. populations, so that accounts for 24% of people are fatally shot by the police. So out of 13% of the people, out of the American population, 24% are shot by law enforcement. That's ridiculous. Blacks are 2.5 times likely. Black African Americans are 2.5 times as likely to be shot as a white American by law enforcement, and this is unacceptable. And there must be real dialogue and changes made by law enforcement to ensure the safety of not just African Americans but of everyone that is discriminated against by police officers that abuse their power. In the next segment of the video, we'll be going out onto LSU's campus, and we'll be talking to people, asking them their questions, getting maybe their personal experiences dealing with law enforcement, and just getting their aspect and their point of views.
So what do you think about police brutality?
I think police brutality is a very real issue facing the black community today, and it needs to be fixed very quickly.
So how can you compare from back then till today?
I feel like back then police brutality was more blatant, open.
Yeah.
I feel like today it's more on the slick. People try to get away with it because the larger population really won't accept it if they knew what was really going on, so they try to keep it under wraps.
All right. And what you think needs to be done to fix it?
I feel like the only way that it can be fixed is to get higher representation from people from the communities that are being oppressed by police brutality. So more African Americans, Hispanics, people like that on the police force probably be better.
So what do you think about police brutality?
I feel like police brutality is still very prevalent, although it is 2019. Especially, I'm born and raised in Baton Rouge. If you can see it in previous news articles and on different stations, the documented police brutality that has come from Baton Rouge Police Department is something that definitely needs to be addressed and needs to be corrected for sure.
All right. How can you compare from back then to now?
I'd say it's still probably the same amount of police brutality. It's just not as it's more discreet. We have advancement of technology nowadays, so they do have cameras that are on police officers, but at the same time, you still see those incidents of police brutality happening and police officers getting away with it. So now it's more so it's being seen in the public eye, but it's still occurring like almost you see a story every week, every month. So there's still the same amount going on. It's just more viewable to the public.
All right. And what do you think needs to be done to stop?
They like I said, they do have cameras on police officers now, but even that in itself, it helps a little bit more. You see people recording from their own phones nowadays. I think that helps, but there needs to be a change within police officers, within the police departments.
Yeah.
They need to hold each other more accountable. I think that there's a brainwash mentality when people join a police force, and for you to keep your job and advance and do well, you have to think like everybody else, and that's the problem. The problem's not within the public, it's within the police department. We need some change, and we need people to really look at themselves first and say, what, I am the problem, let me change myself, and then it'll translate onto other people. So
What do you think about police brutality?
I think it's one of the biggest issues in our country right now. And I think that the government needs to make a better effort in order to educate not just the people, but the police force on how to properly, make sure that this stuff doesn't happen anymore.
How can you compare from back then till now?
Back when?
Back then, like 70s, 60s, 80s?
So it has a lot of similarities. The only difference is that we don't have segregation laws anymore. So we've been segregated, but the behavior of the police force is still very similar to that of 30, 40, 50 years ago.
And what you think needs to be done to stop it?
I think think I think the police need to be educated on how to kind of like. Wait, hold on.
She just hit the wall.
I need to like. I'm trying to think of this word, but I can't get the word in my head. The police need to be educated on how to de-escalate. That was the word I needed. How to de-escalate, high intensity like situations without having to use their guns. Now, in terms of the people, I think people also need to be educated on what police see as a threat, because 9 times out of 10 the police's justification is going to be, oh, they felt threatened. So if as people and individuals we know what triggers them, then that could help.
So as you can see from the people we just interviewed, police brutality is still quite prevalent in today's society. And there needs to be, like I said earlier, there needs to be a dialogue, there needs to be discussions and debates and things. There needs to be a lot of things put in place to ensure that, police brutality does not continue to go on as we go on through the next eras. Yes, it has gone down over the past 30, 40 years, but as you can see within the youth, there's still a big impact and there's still a lot of people that are being affected and harmed from police brutality. From that point, and we need to talk to, counselors, take it up a notch, go governors, senators, things of that sort. There needs to be new laws in place and things need to be changed in order to ensure that, our, not just African Americans, but everyone in general can go home to their families at the end of the night.